So now it is a good time to have a look at what a bed looks like after it's been cultivated for a year or even more. So how do you need to prepare your beds every year or after every planting once they've been created? So our beds are permanent, which means that once we've marked them and set them up and created them with the process that you've seen before, they remain in place, and the only thing that needs doing is harvesting your food, looking after your plants, and at the end remove any debris and plant again. But what does the preparation process look like? Well, first of all, let's have a look at how this bed, which was planted with carrots last year and then we let it go weedy for demonstration purposes, let's have a look at how the soil looks like. So this has been in cultivation for 1.5 years now, if not more. With this tool I can select a plug and show you what the soil looks like. So this is a bulb planter by Wolfgarten, and here we go. So you can actually see that there has been a lot of mixing activity, and whereas it used to be mostly just clay and compost on top, there is now an area where compost and clay are starting to mix up. Even the clay that's at the bottom is now in a state that is definitely not compacted, definitely not impermeable, but nice and crumbly. So by not disturbing the soil and letting nature and especially soil life do its work, we have created the conditions for our clay to start to flocculate, which means to become crumblier and more accessible to roots, water and oxygen. So how do we go about fixing this bed for the next planting? So I'm now going to take you with me through the process of preparing a very weedy bed. Now this is very unlikely. If you have seen all of our beds, most of them will have very few weeds even after a very long time of growing a crop. But if for some reason you have a bed that just goes out of control and it becomes very weedy, as it can happen with certain crops, so if you have not much time to look after a specific area of the garden, you can still bring it back relatively easily without having to do any disturbance or any damage to your soil. Step number one is to do some weeding. So we're going to start by weed the bed without cultivating it, without rotavating it, without digging it. We just remove the weeds. We can leave some of the roots of the weeds if they're not spreading ones, and remove just the top, making sure that we remove any growing point of the plant. For those that are creeping, we want to remove the roots, making sure that we leave as much of the soil that's attached to those roots in the bed. And then we remove any debris, any rest of crops. Here you can see there are some carrots that were damaged by rodents, so we're going to remove them, salvage the ones that are good. We're going to clear essentially the surface, and then we're going to start doing something else to improve our soil and prepare it for the next crop. So before amending the bed and addressing its structure and fertility, we mark the sides to differentiate between the paths and the actual surface of the bed. Then we can address the structure issues, and we do that by using an oscillating hoe to remove any weed roots that have remained, and also creating a nice tilth in the top centimeters of the bed. And if necessary, we can broad fork. Now this will only be necessary in clay soils and in the first few years, because in time the bed structure and texture will improve, and you can see here already in the second year how much better the situation is. And then we rake, paying attention all the time never to invert the layers of the soil. If necessary, we can add some compost, and at this stage in the second or third year we're looking at a 2 to 3 centimeter layer to keep the clay covered with mulch. And so we're not adding a lot of compost at this stage, just a 2 to 3 centimeters layer to keep the surface of the soil covered and soil biology protected and fed. The paths get mulched with wood chip, and one last rake, and the bed is nice and ready for the next crop. Soil fully covered, no disturbance apart for a light aeration, and within the same day we can transplant another crop.